Welcome, football fans, to a very special reaction video on the Bottom Line View. Typically, I'm reacting to Colin Cowherd, or I'm reacting to Nick Wright say something outlandish about the Kansas City Chiefs. But today, we're reacting to our very own. That's right. We have our boy Ultra here, a project of his own. The last 25 years of the NFL has seen a lot of great quarterbacks. Ultra has narrowed it down to 25. So we are going to react. I have not seen the list. The best 25 quarterbacks from 25 to 1 of the last 25 NFL seasons. If that sounds good, Gronk, spike the like button. Don't be a jabroni and subscribe and give some love to a longtime BLVer Ultra in the comment section below. Let him know what you guys think about his list. Welcome, Mr. Ultra, to the Bottom Line View. He is a BLV versus Consensus podcast member, and he's ready for his time to shine. What's up, Ultra?
Doing well, excited to do this list. And I just thought as I was finishing it, there's nobody better to talk about this very subject with than Mitch Mullaney himself, because he has been watching the NFL since I believe around the start of like 2002, I think. Was it the year after the
Yes,
Patriots won
around
their first?
there. I mean, I was very young.
You've
About
basically watched all of this happen. And so I think you have a unique perspective because you saw all of it. You remember all of it pretty much.
the 25 greatest quarterbacks of the 21st century, according to Ultra. Now, the criteria: Ultra: longevity, statistical production, playoff performance, awards and accolades, dominance at the position / their peak performance, and winning. Is there anything you want to add here before we get into the list?
Maybe you can interpret a little bit of the eye test there as well, because that obviously plays a little bit of a factor into it, but that's mostly the criteria. Remember, this is based only on what a quarterback has done from 2000 onward. So like Brett Favre. Brett Favre, spoiler alert, is on this list, but I'm not taking into account what Brett Favre did in 1996 or 1997. That's not a part of this list. Kurt Warner is on this list. His 1999 season where he won the MVP and won Super Bowl MVP, not a part of this list, not considered at all. It's a rich tapestry of what I consider when evaluating quarterback. Keep in mind that I'll default more towards accolades when comparing players I wasn't old enough to see personally. I inherently don't have as much nuance when comparing those guys. So guys that I saw over the last 15 years since I've been watching football, I have more nuance. I have a better idea of who was actually better, who I thought was better when they were playing. Whereas guys in the early mid 2000s, I don't have as much inherently because I wasn't watching football. I wasn't old enough at that time. So I'll default more towards the accolades and the stats and the resumes in that case. But yeah.
Honorable mentions. Okay, Kirk Cousins, Dakota Prescott, Matthew Hasselbeck, Dante Culpepper, and wow, the man, the myth, and the controversial Deshaun Watson. Is there anyone you really want to talk about here that surprised
I'll,
you or
I'll,
stood
I'll
out?
go quickly on all of them. Kirk Cousins statistically probably should be on this list, but had no relevant postseason moments really that were any good. His best was a wild card game against the Saints several years ago. Just didn't win it enough and was never really in any MVP race or ever really came that close to getting to a Super Bowl. Dak Prescott, shorter career, but kind of the same thing with Kirk Cousins, has put up some very impressive statistics, but no eye-popping statistics. I would say that has ever been really like the best in the league other than 1 year maybe, and also never even made a conference championship game. That hurt him a bit. The playoff stuff hurt him a bit. Matt Hasselbeck, really good in his role in the mid to late 2000s and won at a pretty decent clip, was pretty efficient. But that team also, you have to keep in mind, that was a lot of Sean Alexander, also never really put up the volume numbers that were that impressive. Dante Culpepper had a couple years, especially 2004, where he was sick. He was awesome. But it was a shorter career. He kind of flamed out. A lot of that was Randy Moss, one of the two greatest receivers ever. And Deshaun Watson, for 3 years, was awesome. in Houston, made the playoffs 2 years. The year before all the rape stuff happened, he was a top 3 quarterback in the league statistically. He had a really high peak, but it was for a really short time. And since obviously he's come back, he's been a complete disaster. So he just didn't do quite enough to make this list. But those are the guys that I considered at one time when I was making this list. I had each of these 5 guys on it. But at the end, when I was doing the final like cuts for it, they all ended up just missing out.
Yeah, I would agree with all of these guys missing out. Cousins and Prescott, playoff performance related. And I would also say I don't think either have been in the top 7 quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't think they've ever reached that peak. Matt Hasselbeck, well, he did go to a Super Bowl. I think him and Culpepper and even Watson, prime was pretty good, but short-lived. I don't think any of those guys really had the success for the longevity of a Cousins or a Prescott. So I agree with those. At number 25, Jared Goff. I feel like Jared Goff, that's an interesting one. I kind of want to see the other players on the list, but yeah, I mean, for me, like this is the first year in my recollection where Jared Goff has really felt like a top 10 quarterback. Because in past seasons, although he had a lot of success, I feel like we're almost backtracking because I recall talking about Jared Goff as like a Jimmy Garoppolo-esque player.
I
Or like
remember this.
a
Yes.
Brock Purdy-esque player or like a system quarterback, right? Like even when he
Yeah.
went to the Super Bowl in 2018 and he had a good playoff run until the Super Bowl, or the mixed success of 2 different franchises. I do think you have to almost like erase your preconceived notion about Jared Goff from his Ram career and kind of do a little reversal where it's like, well, now that we've seen him be successful in Detroit and be successful with the Rams, was he just good the whole time? And that's kind of the question you've got to lead yourself to. I
And
think that's maybe what you're doing here. I don't know.
and here's the other thing. When you actually look at his career, he's had
Yeah.
a very successful career. He's had, I think people would debate, some people, that Dak in that draft class was the better quarterback. And I think in terms of a career, I would rather have Jared Goff's career so far than I would Dak's. He's made 4 Pro Bowls, which is as many as Matt Ryan. It's as many as Cam Newton. It's as many as Josh Allen, or more than Josh Allen, actually. He finished in the top 5 of MVP voting in 2024 this past season. That's really impressive. And you look at it, I do kind of agree because his rookie year, when the Rams were awful with Jeff Fisher, he was awful. In 2017 and 2018 with Sean McVay, when nobody could figure out their offense for 2 years, he was great. And they had Todd Gurley, was the best running back in the league. Then in 2019 and 2020, when teams started to figure out the Rams more, the personnel wasn't quite as good. He wasn't quite as good. First year in Detroit, when they were really bad, he was bad. And then the last 3 years, as Detroit has become this really good team, he's been really good. But I think the fact that Goff has done it with 2 separate teams, and the fact that it had been one thing if he had like in 2022, he had one really good year with Detroit, if he had just backslid, but he's continued to get better. And this past season was, in my opinion, definitely the best year of his career. And
Yeah.
he was like legitimately, throughout points of the season, people were talking about him in the MVP race. He has made 2 conference championships. He's had good playoff moments. He's had bad playoff moments too. But he's a winner, man. He's a winner. And I think, I wouldn't consider him at all for like the Hall of Fame right now. But if he either has an MVP caliber season where maybe he wins an MVP, or if he maybe gets to and wins a Super Bowl, he has that kind of career where you kind of stack him up with some of the guys who barely made it to the Hall of Fame. He does kind of remind me in some ways of like the Matt Ryan of this era. And he's a really good pocket passer. I think he's gotten more mature and he's become a better leader. And he has in Detroit, he's done a great job of matching like efficiency while also being one of the most prolific passers in terms of like total passing yards and touchdowns. And so definitely somebody that I wouldn't say can carry a team, but has
Yeah.
had an effectively really successful and productive career thus far.
Yeah, guys, let us know in the comments what you think of Jared Goff on this list, because I think some will say that he's propped up by situation, as you brought up throughout his career. If the team is good, the protection is good, he is good. But if it's not all there for him, he can be also seen by some as overrated. That being said, if you're going off of accolades, performance, stats, I can see why he's on the list, right? So he's one of those that is a little controversial for the list just because of when you look at him and you have the eye test, it doesn't appear like he's a top 25 quarterback of the last 25 years. But if you stack up his career, that's when you start to discuss things. Maybe just a guy that's been in great situations and has benefited from that. But at the same time, he is coming off his best season. He seems to be ascending as a player. Smart player, good decision maker, very good arm. I think can maximize good schemes. So that's Jared Goff at number 25. At number 24, Jalen Hurts.
Speaking of
Okay.
guys in great situations, right?
This is going to be another one that's controversial in the comments because some people will be like, Jalen Hurts, he's too low. I mean, he's a top 5 quarterback in the league, Ultra. Don't you know that? Come on. All he had to do was hand it to Saquon.
Eagles fans will be coming for me.
But at the same time, he's a guy that I think a lot of people look at, and he's somewhat a flawed drop back passer that doesn't see the field that well, and at times has kind of been the passenger of a great roster, a great run game, great offensive line. But what I like about Jalen Hurts from a career perspective is he wins in the playoffs. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. Okay. He is dynamic as an athlete. He has the rushing ability on top of, passing production. Doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I think that's also a big thing. And he's a very good leader of one of the better teams over the last few years. So that's what stands out to me. From a fundamental standpoint, I don't think he's a great passer. I think if this were the top 25 passers of the last 25 years, he would not be on this list. But I do think there are some things he does well. I think down the field, he's an explosive passer, and he does find his way out of danger very often, which is why I think he's played so well against the team like the Chiefs, because he just manages that so effectively, and he's very confident and composed. So any thoughts on his career so far and why you have him on the list?
Yeah, so you can see the accolades there. Super Bowl 59 champion, Super Bowl 59 MVP, 2-time Pro Bowler, and he was second in MVP voting in 2022. Jalen Hurts, I respect Jalen Hurts. I have since he came off the bench in 2018 in the SEC title game against Georgia to come back and beat us. But one thing you got to give Jalen Hurts, man, and this was true a couple years ago, and this was true again about a month and a half ago when he played in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs again. The guy comes up in the 2 biggest games of his career. He has been awesome in both of those games, especially the one that they lost. I thought he was even better in that game than he was in this past year's game. He did almost win a league MVP. In fact, if he hadn't gotten hurt at the end of that 2022 season, maybe he ends up winning MVP. I don't know if he would because Mahomes was crazy that year, but he finished second in MVP. He made another Pro Bowl, and he wins in an extremely high clip. And look, obviously, like Mitch said, he's not the best passer. He does not have the volume statistics of some of the other quarterbacks of this era, like a Joe Burrow or a Mahomes or a Josh Allen. He does not have, I would say, in terms of his running, he's not as electric as Lamar, obviously, but he has had a lot of rushing touchdowns. His total touchdown numbers are extremely impressive. And in terms of passing, like his efficiency numbers, if you actually look at them, especially this past year and in 2022, they're actually not that bad. They hold up pretty well relative to the rest of the league. And I think that's something that's impressive. And the other thing that I really respect about Jalen Hurts, great leader, seems like a great teammate, and somebody that always seems to stay calm and composed and can kind of relax his teammates a little bit and help them play their best, which I think something that has helped the Eagles over the last couple years. Has objectively had a really successful start to his career thus far, and in some ways reminds me a lot of what I thought about Russell Wilson about a decade ago.
Interesting. I do think him above Goff is the right call. One won a Super Bowl, one didn't.
And the other thing was Hurts played way better in both than Goff did in his as well.
That's true. 23, Mr. Joe Burrow. Joe Shiesty. Joe Burrow definitely deserves to be on this list. I think from a pure ability standpoint, I would argue he might be a little higher than this. But I do agree that maybe he hasn't achieved enough. Doesn't have, the individual accolades, so to speak. He did lead the league in some stats this year, I believe, but went to a Super Bowl, kind of a miracle run that year that was based on opportunistic defense and then also his clutch play in the end of games. And I think what's really going to establish his legacy is these next 5 years. Like, can he carry this franchise now that they've put all the money on T. Higgins and Jamar Chase? Can he be at the top of the NFL year in, year out, throwing the football, passing yards, passing touchdowns? That potency potentially could move him way up this list, even if he doesn't win a Super Bowl. So he could maybe end up with like a Dan Fouts type career at the end of the day. I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking. But if he could add a Super Bowl to that, that could launch him into Hall of Fame, definitely. So yeah, I think in terms of accuracy, in terms of anticipation, intelligence, pre-snap, post-snap, he is excellent. And I think he's also very underrated, ad-libbing and creating under pressure as well. And this has been probably the best quarterback in football at getting sacked or hit and then coming back the next play and not caring about it. He's probably the best at that. Some guys can simply avoid it better than him, but he's really good at it. Doesn't matter if his O-line sucks. He's still good, like this season. So
Yeah, so this is definitely one where those Eagles fans you were mentioning earlier are going to come for me because they're going to look at it and say, wait, Jalen Hurts has been to more Super Bowls. He's won a Super Bowl. They've made the same amount of Pro Bowls. He came closer to winning an MVP than Joe Burrow ever has. How is Joe Burrow above him? But this is where that context of me being alive and knowing and being a football fan really comes into play and helps me in this situation because I've watched them both over the last 4 years. And I know Joe Burrow is a lot better than Jalen Hurts. That's good.
ooh,
So even though Jalen Hurts, you could argue, has the better accolades in some ways, that context of I know that when they've both played a full season in 2021, Joe Burrow was better. In 2022, it's probably lean Jalen Hurts slightly. And then this past year, Joe Burrow was better, even though Jalen Hurts won the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow led the league in passing yards, led the league in passing touchdowns, even though I didn't even put it on there. He led the league in completion percentage in 2021. He led the league in yards per attempt in 2021. He won Comeback Player of the Year twice, which is pretty funny. But yeah, Joe Burrow, I agree with everything you said. The best pure pocket passer in the NFL right now. I think with him, early in his career, especially while they were going on that playoff run, he was drawing the young kind of Tom Brady comparisons it
yeah.
was the first one where I felt like it was kind of real with him. Now I feel like after this year, it's kind of evolving into, is he this era's Drew Brees? Where is he's going to put up a bunch of huge numbers every year. Everyone's going to revere him for his accuracy and his skill at the line of scrimmage and just how productive and proficient he is as a passer. But is he going to win enough? I think he will win. I have faith that a player like him is just too good to not
Yeah.
at some point get back to where they were a couple years ago. The one thing I'll say about Joe Burrow, I do think some of the playoff stuff has been a little bit overrated with
I
him. Like
agree.
if you look back at that the Chiefs AFC Championship game is his calling card because him, Brady, and Hurts are the only guys to beat Mahomes in a playoff game. If you really look, a lot of that was more about the Chiefs or the Bengals defense doing a great job in that game and some terrible plays by Mahomes and the Chiefs in the second half. Joe Burrow didn't really have a great game. And then, some of the other playoff games, he's been kind of hit or miss and inconsistent throughout it. So I do think maybe he gets a little bit of too much credit for some of the playoff runs, but it's also true that those teams probably, they're not in the playoffs if he's not one of the best quarterbacks in the league that season. And the guy is amazing. Like you said, another thing with him, second and third and long with this guy doesn't feel like it does with a lot of other quarterbacks. He's so automatic in some of those situations. And so, yeah, this is a guy that I definitely think will rise up the list as we go through the next 5 to 10 years, and someone that definitely could have wind up in the Hall of Fame one day.
Injuries have already hurt his career as well, and he does wear the same number as Drew Brees. Keep that in mind.
Yeah,
All right, at number
and that was
22,
that was his title real quickly growing up.
Carson Palmer. This is an interesting one. Carson Palmer was one of those quarterbacks that had like some really good stretches of his career, and he had like a valley. It's kind
Yep.
of a Kurt Warner-esque career a little bit. Didn't quite reach the heights of Kurt Warner, but when I was really getting into the NFL, Carson Palmer, in my opinion, was like a top 5 quarterback in the league. I think, around 2005-ish, 2006-ish. I don't recall exactly the season where he broke out. I want to say it was 2005.
You're
But
right. No, that period for sure.
yeah, he was right up there. Like, he was already seen as a top prospect coming into the NFL. He played at USC. Then he went to Cincinnati, and that team with Chad Johnson and TJ Who's Your Mama and those guys, I mean, they were able to just throw the ball around the yard. They were one of the most fun teams to watch in the NFL. And he sort of made the Bengals relevant again. Like, that era of the Bengals made them relevant again, that extended into the Andy Dalton era and all that. So, yeah, Carson Palmer was a good pocket passer, really strong arm. Couldn't really move that well, in my opinion, but big guy. And I was also impressed by his run with Arizona. He put up a ton of numbers there with Bruce Arians' offense, which is not easy to do. Bruce Arians' offense, a lot of volume, throwing the ball down the field, but that was the type of player that he was. Like, he was able to stand in there, take a big hit, throw the ball down the field, accurate. It wasn't quite on the level of like that really elite group of players like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Drew Brees in his era, but he was kind of like on that next level of guys, in my opinion. But he just never really sustained a lot of consistency. I don't know if that was due to injuries at times or if that was due to location or coaching or system, but it felt like whenever the system was right for him, he was able to make the most of it and be a very good player.
Yeah, and you can see it right there. '05 led the league in touchdowns, led the league in completion percentage. He placed in MVP voting twice. He finished 5th in '05, second in 2015 with the Cardinals. That was the year. Statistically, he might have been, in terms of like purely passing, maybe the best quarterback in the league that year. They went 13-3, got to the NFC Championship game. Yeah, I mean, when he retired, he was very high all time in terms of passing yards, passing touchdowns, pretty decently in terms of efficiency. Definitely in some of his later years with the Bengals, and then his Oakland career
Yeah.
really kind of fell off. Injuries had a lot to do with that. Team support had a lot to do with that. Another guy, a little bit similar to Jared Goff, where it was kind of like what his team was a lot of what he was. But I also did feel like he elevated his teams with the Bengals in a way that Jared Goff maybe never really has, and that gives him a bit of an edge. And he played longer than Jared Goff at this point. So, and then with him, he just had several years where he was awesome. Like '05, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, objectively. Kind of the same with '06, and then 2015, same thing there. So there's not a ton to say really with Carson Palmer. The one thing I will say was his playoff career was very, not very good in what he
Yeah.
did and what we could see of him. But I mean, it was a little bit of a limited opportunities because of the team that was surrounding him for much of his career. So just a really respectable career, not a Hall of Famer or anything like that, but a good career, I would say, and worthy of being on this list.
So this is one to me where you chose to go with like volume and an entire career body work over like perhaps what somebody would kind of think how good a player is, like just comparing Joe Burrow to Carson Palmer. I don't think Carson Palmer at his best was ever discussed the way Joe Burrow is right now.
Okay, yeah, and can I make one thing clear? If we're just
Yeah.
talking about how good a player was, like if this were Madden and we were doing their average player rating throughout their career, Joe Burrow is, in my opinion, in the top 10. And we'll get to that with a
Okay.
guy that we'll see in a couple
So
spots here.
you're definitely leaning more into body of work accolades than it is
Yeah.
just simply the eye
It's a
test or the
It is the rich
reputation.
tapestry, and then the next guy we'll get to is more of the eye test variety. But
Okay. I'm intrigued. Who's number 21? At number 21, Andrew Luck. Now, this is an interesting one because this is everybody's favorite what if quarterback, Andrew Luck, right? He was the man coming into the NFL. Suck for luck was a thing. It was a real thing. The Colts literally told Peyton Manning, you cannot play. They would not allow him on the field. They were cutting guys. They were sitting guys. I mean, I didn't even know half the roster that year on the Colts. They just did not care. They were trying to play the worst quarterback possible just so they could get Andrew Luck. And then Andrew Luck immediately in the NFL just turns this team around, just throws lasers all over the field. He's one guy that I think if you could look at like some of his best seasons, in my opinion, or some of his best moments aren't indicated by the stats. Like I think
I agree with
simply what
that.
he was able to do with that team when their team was not good on defense, not good on the offensive line, kind of average everywhere, and he was just able to uplift the entire team through his ability, which was a little bit kind of strange. It was this a little bit throwback-ish, but also like a little bit leaning more into like the next generation of quarterbacks. So it was that weird segue between we're going from this Peyton Manning, Tom Brady era into like, okay, this guy's kind of athletic, but like he's got those like pocket passer traits, coached under Jim Harbaugh as well, and then gets to the NFL and he's got this next level of like physicality. Like he was a pretty thick quarterback. Like he could take a lot of contact, and then eventually that broke him down because he would get sacked and hit so much behind the worst offensive line. And then they built their offensive line right after he gets injured, Ultra. So yeah, Andrew Luck was awesome. I really respected him because I thought he was a really good passer, a really good. He could do basically everything, and he could do it right away. Like as soon as he got to the NFL, he was just good right away. He just made everybody around him better. He was smart. He was very aggressive. I really appreciated that style of his game as well. He was very aggressive, let the ball rip. Like that's a guy that he was good as an underdog because he would make the throws necessary to win, even if it would lead to negatives. It would lead to interceptions. So I think Andrew Luck, from a talent standpoint, is probably higher than this, but from a career standpoint, I can understand. I think he went to, was it just one AFC championship?
Yeah, 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of Big Ben in there. I think there was some of Peyton. I think there was some of Aaron Rodgers in the way that he kind of threw the ball. There was some of that Josh Allen kind of the way he played in terms of like his mentality, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that he had some of the best traits of kind of like the generation right before him, and then the
Yeah.
generation that kind of was right after him with Mahomes and Josh Allen and the guys we see today. I think this is where, because we were NFL fans at the time that Andrew Luck was at his best and when he was playing, I think some
Yeah.
of the younger NFL fans that just started watching the last couple of years weren't able to see him, would look at his numbers, would look at what he achieved, and it's like, okay, this guy was pretty good, but I mean, does he really belong? I mean, really only played 6 years, never made a Super Bowl, never placed in MVP voting. Like, does he really belong on this list? But it's like, number one, this guy, I like that you painted out the situation because the team was awful that he came
They were
into.
bad. Even the team Ultra that faced the Patriots in the AFC Championship had no reason to be
Yeah,
there.
they had a couple good receivers.
Yeah.
T.Y. Hilton was really good.
TY.
They had old Frank Gore, who was still pretty good,
Old
and
Reggie Wayne.
they had like Reggie Wayne was done. They had like two good defensive players, and that's it. It was a terrible offensive line. It was not a very good coach, to be honest, if we're being
No.
honest. And it was a terrible GM. And he made 4 Pro Bowls. He won 4 playoff games. I think because he got to the divisional round in 2013, and then he got there in
Right.
2018 as well. So he won playoff games in 3 different years. They just weren't a very good team, and he led the league in passing touchdowns in 2014, 40, which is a really impressive number. Even more impressive back then, I think, 10 years ago than it is today because of the
Yeah.
one fewer game. Um,
And the
was
competition to lead the league at that time is pretty impressive too,
Yeah.
because you're
What's
playing prime Rodgers, prime Brady, Breeze. right? All those guys. And Peyton was still in the
2014,
league.
Peyton was at the very end of his prime then too. The one thing I'll say, he could be a little reckless. He tried
Yeah.
stuff that would definitely get him more criticized today because of social media. It wasn't as big of a thing 10 years ago. His interception totals were not very impressive, and his completion percentage was not very impressive until his final year. What's sad is I really think the best Andrew Luck that we might have seen was that last year with the Colts. It was either 2018 or 2014. It
Mm,
really looks like this guy would be. That's kind of a what if, is like
yeah.
what the Colts could have been if he had just stayed, but obviously he was just so banged up. It's sad what happened to him, but man, this guy was awesome. And again, remembering what he was when he was playing, I definitely, especially when he was healthy, considered this guy a top 5 quarterback at multiple different points in his career. And so Andrew Luck, sad what happened, one of the biggest what ifs in NFL history, but from what we got, he had to be on this list.
Don't let NFL fans forget about Andrew Luck, guys, because this feels like a forgotten quarterback moving forward. All right, let's get to number 20 now. My guy, Tony Romo, who I prefer as a player over a commentator, not like everybody else. This generation of football fans only see Tony Romo Ultra as the commentator that says, Jim, look at that play, Jim. Nah, I saw Tony Romo as the backyard specialist, great passer. I love the way he played, man. He was a gambler out there, but he was also like very smooth, effortless passer, could kind of do everything from a creation standpoint, but heavily criticized, like extremely criticized. And this was like the last era of quarterback, in my opinion, for the Cowboys, because I think Dak almost has, his criticism has actually decreased, because I feel like the 2000s was just different in terms of media and the way that they would cover celebrities. So this guy was a big celebrity. You know, he had the whole Jessica Simpson thing, the Carrie Underwood thing. Bro, this guy was at the top of the list. He was A-list. Dak's not even close, right? And he was criticized, okay? Because everybody wanted, the Cowboys to do great, but they didn't realize that Tony Romo is the reason they were as good as they were. He had a couple really good teams kind of in the middle and then at the end of his career, but yeah, I thought he's super underrated. It won't really be seen in the statistics, but I just felt like he elevated his teams. He played with such a fun style of football to watch. And I never really blamed him for their lack of success. I thought they got robbed in 2014 against a very good opponent on the road. And I felt like in 2007, hey, if the Patriots could lose to the Giants, I'm not really going to blame Tony Romo for that either, despite them being the favorite at home in that game and the whole scandal the week previous. So, Ultra, what's your thoughts, man? One of my favorite quarterbacks.
And you said something there. It maybe won't be shown in the statistics, except it actually is.
Is
Like
it?
if you look at some of
Efficiency.
his efficiency numbers,
Okay.
especially adjusting for his era,
Mm,
are really impressive. You look at a
yeah.
year like 2014, efficiency wise, he was right there with league MVP Aaron Rodgers. He even led the league in passer rating that year. He led the league in completion percentage that year. He led the league in QBR that year. He led the league in yards per attempt that year. He led the league in yards per attempt in 06. His 06 season was really good. That was his first full year as a starter, or first year as a starter. He didn't start the full year.
Yep.
09, 07, two other really good
Ultra,
years.
this was
Like,
a Brock Purdy. This was a Brock Purdy before a Brock Purdy. This guy came in. Nobody knew who this guy was, bro.
The difference is, Mitch, he's actually a lot better than Brock Purdy.
No, he is. But like in 2005, I remember being like, who is Tony Romo? Like, who is this guy?
And I
then,
will
of course,
say,
they go on this run. He turns the franchise around. He was actually kind of getting some Brady comps because of it, because it was Drew Bledsoe.
Yeah, Bledsoe, right.
But then, like, his first playoff moment is like him
They
fumbling the snap.
And then what everyone forgets, he almost ran it back in.
He was just one of those players that, like, he has these it's so weird to explain, but like
And then the other
he
thing,
was
Mitch,
the reason they would get there, and then he would also be part of why they messed it up. You know what
but
I'm saying?
the other thing, Mitch, is because they were the Cowboys. They were always in prime time too. So
Yes.
everyone, it was open season whenever they lost a big game. I remember this one game where they blew like a 12-point lead to the Giants. It was the year the Giants
It's
won the
always the
Super
Giants.
Bowl in like 2 minutes. It was ridiculous. But yeah, Tony Romo, statistically, especially from an efficiency standpoint, for his era was awesome. Was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. His offensive line was horrible for a lot of his career. They finally
Yeah.
built
And
it,
the
and no,
defense too.
they finally built a really like solid team around him in 2014. It was a kind of similar thing to Andrew Luck, where it was a little bit too late, but he, lo and behold, he has the best season of his career. '07, kind of the same thing. He came in, had a lot of early team success. Then there was a little bit of a lull where he was still really good during that time. There were some bad moments in the clutch, I'll say that, but I really felt like without him, that team would have been way worse. And the difference between Romo and Dak for me is I feel like Dak has had much more consistent team support than
Yeah.
Romo has throughout their careers. Dak's, I think, has had consistently better defenses and better offensive lines. And I would even say better run games, considering he had Zeke for the first 3-4 years of his career when he was in his prime. Romo really just had DeMarco Murray that last year. The
He never
playoffs hurt.
really had a run game that was all that good.
Yeah,
Marion
playoff.
Barber, Felix Jones. They tried to fix it. It didn't really work. And then his defenses from like 2010 to like 2013 were horrible. They were
Yeah,
they couldn't stop the pass. Like it was crazy. They were
the
really bad.
playoffs were a bit of a mixed bag for him, but the final numbers look pretty decent. He had some bad moments, but
Yeah.
man, he made 4 Pro Bowls. He had a winning record. He won it at a pretty high rate as a starter, which I think was underrated a little bit. It wasn't like the guy was a complete loser like people act like. So, I mean, again, statistically, he definitely deserves to be on this list. Accolades wise, 4 Pro Bowls, I think speaks for itself. Finishing top 3 MVP speaks for itself, I think. And he had several really great seasons this century, I guess you can say. So definitely deserves to be on this list, Tony
For
Romo.
sure. For sure. I like it. All right, next. Steve McNair. Air McNair. Only 7 seasons in the 2000s. Rest in peace, by the way. He's actually, just to have some relevant conversation here, there could be a quarterback that's being compared to him at first overall this year, potentially going to his former team. Just to bring that up. But Steve McNair, 2003 co-NFL MVP. That's a trivia piece for you guys, right? With Peyton Manning. 2 top 5 MVP finishes. What was the other year? 2000?
2002, finished third.
2002. Okay. So the 2 years consecutively. Yeah. So this is the quarterback that had a throwback style for sure. Athletic at the time, like seen as athletic at the time, could run a little bit, could scramble a little bit. But this is the classic, like, big armed quarterback that could create, could play from the pocket, could throw lasers. Like, he was probably a player that in this era would be seen a lot more in a shining light because I think his stats would pop off the screen a lot more. He's kind of one of those guys that he was stuck in that era between just the end of like that 90s to early 2000s where a lot of his career was still statistically the same of like a 1989, but not quite at that level where, okay, the stats are starting to pop off. So his career can be forgotten
And
despite the
by the time the
MVP.
stats just began to pop off, it was getting to his later career as well.
And he kind of did carry not a great franchise. They had some good teams, but not one of the top franchises in the NFL.
Yeah, so Steve McNair is someone I think when you started watching the NFL was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So it's probably one of your earliest memories was probably, you remember that 2003 divisional round?
I
That
do
was a
remember it
war.
was cold, bro.
That Drew
Cold.
Bennett drop. That was a war of a game. Yeah, Steve McNair. Look, he won an NFL MVP. He has to be on this list somewhere. You can't leave him out.
Yeah.
3 Pro Bowls, placed in the top 5 of MVP, finishing twice in back-to-back years, which I think is very impressive and very relevant. Had a couple really good seasons in terms of winning as well. 02, 03, 2000, even 2006 with the Ravens.
That's what I
When
was going to bring up. I think
like,
what solidifies his place on the list is the fact that he was successful with Tennessee. His peak was very high. And then at the same time, he was able to go to a different team despite them being pretty defensively led. And
yeah,
then go to that team that never really had a good quarterback. I remember that. It's like, oh, they got Steve McNair now. The Ravens are going to be trouble because it's like, oh, they finally got a quarterback. Because before that was like Kyle Bowler is their quarterback and stuff like that. So he kind of was able to change that conversation, take them to the playoffs. I think they lost to the Colts, but yeah,
yeah.
Steve McNair was, that's what solidifies it for me is the success on 2 teams. I don't think that gets talked enough about when you're talking about quarterbacks.
I don't think he did quite enough to be a Hall of Famer.
Mm.
And it is worth noting that in that '06 season, Peyton Manning in that playoff game was terrible, and they lost because Steve McNair was even worse.
The
But
Colts defense went crazy, bro.
great, a crazy season in '03 for that era in terms of efficiency.
Mm.
And just in general, I agree with you. He was very fun to watch, very interesting style. And I do think he would be seen in a higher light if he played in 2023 than he did in 2003. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Steve McNair at 19. Oh, at number 18. He's too low. He's too low,
I knew
Ultra.
this was coming.
Josh Allen. He's top 10, man. Come on. 2024 NFL MVP, 3-time Pro Bowler. I don't care about the stats. You watch Josh Allen play. Has there ever been a quarterback this gifted? Arm strength, rushing ability, size. As fun as Josh Allen is, running people over, hurdling people, throwing it to a receiver, throwing it back to him, running it into the end zone. I mean, come on. Josh Allen does it all. He's carried, for me, Ultra, putting this into perspective. The Buffalo Bills were a laughing stock. Absolutely irrelevant. Nobody wanted to play there. Nobody wanted to coach there. The Patriots beat them every single time they played. I think Brady was like 33-3 against the Buffalo Bills. Like, it was crazy. They were so bad. So Josh Allen was able to go there and turn this into one of the most entertaining teams, one of the most consistently winning franchises, without a guy that I would say is an elite coach in Sean McDermott, like some of the other great quarterbacks of his era, where Andy Reid had been to Super Bowls and NFC championships, and Harbaugh had won a Super Bowl. If you're just comparing him to
The 2 guys he's most compared to have Hall of Fame coaches.
exactly, well, he doesn't. So I think, yeah, his accolades, his accomplishments may not be seen as top 15 in this era or the last 25 years, but I think most people with eyes would suggest that Josh Allen is probably too low on this list.
Okay, so here's what I'll say. A lot of this list was kind of in clumps. And so Josh Allen was somewhere like you could have put him 18 through 14, 18 through 13, that kind of range. All of it was really close in terms of where I would have had those guys. What ended up putting I did a little bit of I didn't want to project it too much because Josh Allen, when he retires, will 100%, in my opinion, barring some huge catastrophic injury, will be a Hall of Famer for sure. But I don't think he's a Hall of Famer if he retired today. And the guys that I have in the top 12, I think all of those guys, even if you just take their career from 2000 on, would make the Hall of Fame or should be in the Hall of Fame or are Hall of Famers in my opinion.
Interesting.
So I want to start off with all the good stuff because he won the league MVP this year. Maybe the most controversial MVP of my life. In fact, probably is the most controversial MVP award of my life because he won it at a position in the same season he wasn't even designated the best player at. Not saying, I mean, obviously he had an amazing season, but so did Lamar. But 4 top 5 MVP finishes. That's where I think you could, if you wanted to make the argument that Josh Allen should be higher on this list, that's where you can really hem in because there have been several seasons over the last 5-6 years where he's been considered a top 5 quarterback in football. I think
That's what I want to say, Ultra, is like how many quarterbacks since 2000 have had a stretch like Josh Allen from 2020 until now, where every
there,
season he
yeah.
has been a top 5 quarterback. Like,
Well, it's really Mahomes is really the only other guy in that kind of era that is that because
no,
even
no, no.
Lamar.
I mean, like in general, since 2000, how many
Well, it would have
quarterbacks?
been
Like
Brady,
seven,
Manning,
six.
Rodgers, Breeze, kind of it. Maybe Rich Gannon. Kind of it. I mean, there's only like 8 guys really. So Josh Allen, the thing that hurts him for me, he never
We're still
really
talking
led the
about Josh.
league in a single never really led the league in a single major passing statistic, not completion percentage, yards, touchdowns, or rating. Led the league in QBR this past season. He also has not made a Super Bowl, which hurt him a little bit. He's not made a first team All Pro, which hurt him a little bit. But he's been money in the playoffs in several different postseasons, 2021 most specifically. But his overall career postseason numbers are as good, really, as any quarterback in postseason history.
Well, his
And
per game numbers are like arguably the best.
yeah, it's like him and Mahomes are, I think, the 2 best in terms of like passer rating
Obviously,
and
the
stuff like
era
that.
helps, but I
The
think that
era
does
definitely
speak.
helps with that. But what you can also say in his favor is if you compare his regular season numbers to his playoff numbers are better.
Yeah.
Which in a lot of quarterbacks, even great quarterbacks, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So that definitely helps him. And again, if I do when I do this list in 5 years or whatever, he's going to be way higher.
Hmm.
But he hasn't played for that long. He hasn't made a Super Bowl. He's not made a first team All Pro. And in terms of statistics, he's not led the league in a ton of major passing statistics. So that hurt him a little bit. I wanted to put him higher, but I tried to be as objective as possible, not project it too much. And I think 18 is the spot for him right now. Which again, how many quarterbacks have there been since 2000 that have started NFL games? I'm saying only
A lot.
17 have had more successful last 25 years than Josh Allen. So it's not exactly an insult.
Question: if he wins a Super Bowl within the next 2 years, how much higher? Like, if you just added a Super Bowl to his resume,
Oh
not knowing
God,
anything else.
he would be at least in the top 7.
Okay, that's a big difference then.
Yeah, that's why, and that's why he can just skyrocket the next couple of years if he wins another MVP, wins Super Bowl, anything.
So, guys, the difference between these quarterbacks is marginal.
Real quickly, Mitch, I just wanted to say you did embellish it a little bit. He was drafted by a playoff team, the Bills, in 2017, and
Nah,
you said
don't worry about that, bro.
Tom Brady always beat the Bills. I think Josh Allen in his career was like 0-4 and 0-5 against Tom Brady. Like
Yeah,
he
he
never beat
was.
Tom Brady
He
either.
was. He
So
was. Nobody beats Tom Brady. All right. At number 17, this is so funny to me because who is often compared to Josh Allen? Who is Cam Newton often compared to Josh Allen? So, Cam Newton, NFL MVP in 2015. He went to a Super Bowl, might be the difference here. But I think many would argue that Josh is probably better than Cam. And even I'm a huge Cam stan, as you know. He had a short career, extremely impactful and influential career for a multitude of reasons. From a personality standpoint, from just a black quarterback standpoint, and the impact he made there. And then also his rushing numbers, historic. So, Ultra, why is Cam Newton at number 17? Because this guy was controversial throughout his career for not really any reasons due to his own. It was just a player that some people loved, some people hated. He kind of brought this bravado and charisma that a lot of old school fans did not like. So, Ultra, what?
so
Cam Newton.
here's a little bit of BLV lore that only a few people know about. I'm not a huge Cam Newton fan.
No, he doesn't
For a
like it.
lot of reasons. Number one, I'm a Georgia fan, and he went to Auburn. Number two, I'm a Falcons fan, and he played for the Panthers. Number
Ah,
three, I always thought he carried himself like he'd accomplished a little bit more than he actually had. I always thought that he was a little bit more flash than actual substance. I always thought he wasn't as efficient as he should have been. I always thought that he wasn't always the most accurate. He wasn't the most consistent. But at the end of the day, he's not a Hall of Famer, and I don't think he'll make the Hall of Fame. He won't make the Hall of Fame. But if you wanted to make the argument that because of his impact and because of his rushing success, that he is a Hall of Famer, I would listen to it. That I have respect for Cam Newton, even if
Okay.
even if I'm not the biggest fan of him.
Yeah.
He had one of the best. Everyone when they think of Cam Newton thinks of either his last year at college at Auburn, one of the greatest college football seasons ever, or the 2015 amazing MVP year where they went to the Super Bowl and went 15-1. His rookie year is one of the best rookie seasons ever.
It
He
is,
he
yeah.
won Offensive Rookie of the Year for a reason.
Ultra, I remember the first game. I was like, what is this? I think he had like 400 yards. He had like one of these rushing touchdowns. He had like a 40-yard rushing or something crazy.
He had 422 in his
My
first ever
goodness. I remember watching the highlights. I'm like,
his first two games, he threw for 422 and 432.
that's crazy, man. But yeah, Cam Newton was a specimen. And I think the thing with Cam Newton is it's hard to really quantify his career because at the peaks of his career, he could do things that other players could not do. And he could carry his team in a way that only a handful of players could. Like the 2015 Panthers, I know they went 15-1 and they went to the Super Bowl. That offense did not deserve to be that. They had Ted Ginn as their number one wide receiver.
He carried offenses in specific.
He carried his offense. Ron Rivera was a defensive coach. I had no idea what he was doing on offense. And like 2013, 2014, this guy just kept running into the Legion of Boom like every year.
Yeah.
So like the peak of his career, and even in the peak of his career, Ultra, his numbers don't indicate his impact, like his ability to carry his team, because it was really the defense and Cam. That was the team.
Yeah. And he made the playoffs, I think, 4 times. He played 7 playoff games. His best playoff game was actually his last one, which was that crazy loss in that shootout with Breeze, if you remember that game.
Not the Cardinals game?
Well, you can argue it was the Cardinals game, but like I thought in that Saints game he
did play really well.
But he had an amazing rookie season. He had a couple up and down years. He was good in 2013, 2014, not the best. 2015, he was amazing, especially in the second half of that season, really caught fire and rode that all the way into the Super Bowl. Very disappointing, though, in that Super Bowl against one of the best defenses ever. 2016, major down year, bounce back year in 2017, and was having, from a passing perspective, the best season of his career in 2018 until he took that hit against the Steelers, and it all fell apart. And that basically ended his career. He had that 1 year with the Patriots that didn't go well. He came back to the Panthers a few years ago for a couple games, didn't go well. So, yeah, in terms of consistently, like, Josh Allen was a top 5 quarterback, was awesome. Several more years than Cam Newton was. The peak of Cam Newton's career, especially considering what he did with that offense, carrying it in a similar way that Allen did, getting to a Super Bowl. And I also just think his impact in terms of his rushing coming before Josh, in a lot of ways, I thought Cam was kind of set a template for it, which I'm giving him some extra credit for.
Yeah.
He did make a first team All-Pro. He did win an Offensive Player of the Year award. He got to a Super Bowl. I think Cam Newton accomplished a lot, even in a short time in the NFL. So I think I'm giving Cam Newton a lot of credit for that. And in a couple years, will this ranking fall as we go on, as guys play more years? Certainly. But I think what I will say about Cam Newton is no matter what you think about when you look at his, accolades or statistics, he will never be forgotten because of his impact. And I think that matters a lot.
Okay. Comment below your thoughts on that. Cam Newton 17. Oh boy. We're going hit after hit here, Ultra. At number 16, which feels low, by the way, just based on how people talk about Eli Manning. 2-time Super Bowl champion, 2-time commercial winner of the year. No, I'm just kidding. 2-time Super Bowl MVP, 4-time Pro Bowler. Sack percentage leader is an interesting statistic that I would not have.
I really want to get into that because that kind of explains the crux of Eli Manning. Look at those first 2 lines. 2-time Super Bowl champion, 2-time Super Bowl MVP, 4-time Pro Bowler, which is impressive, 2012 sack percentage leader. Because that was the fourth best accolade that I could find. I mean,
Not
what else
two-time interception leader?
did I put in 2025 Kick of Destiny winner?
See,
Maybe
this is it, Ultra, bro. He led the NFL in interceptions multiple times.
3 times.
3 times. And
I guess I could have
he
put
was
in.
also one of the scariest quarterbacks. He's the scariest quarterback the Patriots have ever played. That speaks volumes. Even though he would only score about 20 points per game when he played them.
Okay, to be
he would
fair,
make some of the craziest plays you've ever seen.
I could have put in he led the league in game-winning drives or fourth quarter comebacks in 2011.
Okay.
I probably
I
should have
will
done
say 2011,
yes.
he was great. Top 5, top 3 quarterback in the NFL, arguably, because of the playoffs. But he also has that playoff resume, the clutch gene, and that just like Eli Manning is that guy. The face described him. He would just always have this face where like it was like, he was just like, and that was exactly how he played. Like nothing would rattle him, nothing would get to him. It didn't matter how big the moment was. There's other guys on this list that are below or probably above that get rattled, that might not come up their best in the big moment. And then there's Eli. And then he would just go out there and he would do his thing, bro. He'd just sling the rock. So, yeah. Did the defense help? Did Justin Tuck, maybe should have won one of those MVPs? Maybe. But I feel like Eli, he had a lot of volume too. You could speak this. He had a lot of volume statistics. He's up there with the best of them. He had a consistency, a toughness, right? He never missed games.
Super durable, yeah.
Super durable. I'm surprised he's not higher. I'm not even an Eli guy.
Here's why he's not higher.
Okay.
2011, he was elite. Other than that, I mean, the second best year of his career statistically was probably 2009, maybe 2012. Like,
okay,
he had his prime was really from about 2008 to 2015. The first Super Bowl, Eli Manning in the regular season was one of the worst quarterbacks put up Eli's 2007 regular season stats and compare it to 2015 Peyton stats. They're not that different. They're really not that different. He should not have won Super Bowl MVP. He came up clutch, and he's part of the most memorable play, arguably, in Super Bowl history, the David Tyree catch, and maybe the most memorable game in NFL history. But also, there were some playoff moments where he wasn't good. 05, 06, 2008, when they were the number 1 seed and the defending champion, and he was awful.
I remember they were great that year too. They were a really good team,
and he was awful. So he won 4 playoff games in the 2 years that they won the Super Bowl. Never won a playoff game in another season.
That's crazy.
Like even like Matt Ryan, who you'll see in a couple spots here. Matt Ryan won playoff games in more seasons than Eli Manning did. So and he was exactly 500 for his regular season career.
Mm-hmm.
His volume stats are very impressive, but he never led the league in a single statistic other than sack percentage and game-winning drives and fourth quarter comebacks once, and he led the league in interceptions 3 times. And the only year that he was really a top 5 quarterback objectively was 2011. You're struggling to find many other years where you can even say he was even top 10. And so I can't say Eli Manning was I have never been able to say Eli Manning's better than a quarterback like Matt Ryan or like Phillip Rivers.
Wow.
Because those guys had more seasons where they were better and they played at the same time. Statistically, objectively, it's just factual. And so
despite winning 2 more Super Bowls than both.
Yes, despite winning 2 more Super Bowls than both, because the reality is in that first Super Bowl, even throughout the playoff run, Eli Manning was kind of hit or miss. He was great in 2011. That's his calling card. And if he makes the Hall of Fame, which he probably will, I know he didn't make it initially, but his influence, he'll make it at some point. That will be what got him in. But at the end of the day, do I think Eli Manning should make the Hall of Fame? And do I think Eli Manning was better or had a better career than the 15 guys above him? I don't. Now, he was iconic. He was memorable. If
Yeah.
you want to do the whole old timer, you can't tell the story of the NFL without it. You can't. And it does help him that he beat Brady and the Patriots in both of those Super
Yeah.
Bowls. But what also kind of helps Brady is the fact that like because Eli beat him, we don't view Eli the way we view I don't know, like who's a quarterback like Steve McNair. We like because without it, without that, I just don't. I think his legend. He's one of those guys, and you see it across sports. It's Reggie Miller's a guy like this in the NBA. The legend actually outstrips who he was as a player. Now,
Okay.
with that said, he accomplished enough to where he does deserve to be on this list and at number 16. But I can't put him higher than this because I can't. He didn't have a better career than the 15 guys above him in my opinion. Just didn't.
All right. Let's enter the top 15, shall we? Matthew Stafford. Look at that picture, bro. Look at that face.
I
Matthew
wanted to win
Stafford, the man that at one time I had a debate with Ultra, Durkant, the BLV versus consensus. This is on the Patreon somewhere deep in the files.
You could probably find it.
Stafford, I was the Stafford guy. And now, because he goes to Georgia and he's a Bulldog and he's a Sean McVay stan, Ultra has claimed Matthew Stafford for his own. No, no, no. Don't let anyone forget who put Ultra on to Matthew Stafford. It was me. Me. Okay? Stafford, top 15. See, I don't know if a lot of people would have Stafford over Eli because of the 2 Super Bowls. But in terms of, I mean, the volume stats, if they're not already close now, they're going to be. Stafford has 1
Stafford
Super
were
Bowl.
actually already a little bit better.
Okay, there you go. Stafford already has 1 Super Bowl. I don't know if he'll ever win 2, but that's at least cutting down Eli's only argument in half. Stafford in the season in which Eli was at his best was also pretty darn good, if I'm not mistaken, in 2011.
Yep.
And Stafford has been great for 2 different franchises individually. And really, the only reason Stafford is not higher is because he was stuck in Detroit. That's
That's
why.
true.
Honestly, let's be fair. Okay. Stafford was awesome for a long time. He also had some injuries at times that hurt him as well. But man, like you're talking about actual individual skill. I don't know if it's very comparable. I mean, arm is not comparable. Mobility at their peak is not comparable. Ability to make high end throws. To me, Stafford sort of him and Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Stafford gets enough credit for his passing ability in terms of the arm angles, the flexibility of the arm that was influential to guys like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen in the later generation. So I think Stafford also passed down some things from being a generational prospect in his own right, a first overall pick, to some of the next era that had a big impact on that next era of quarterbacks. So, and I think his game has aged gracefully because he's become smarter and a better decision maker while still having the high end passing traits. Ultra, take it away with your Georgia Bulldog here.
So what really helps in this scenario, and this is another situation kind of similar to Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts, where Eli Manning made double the Pro Bowls that Matthew Stafford did. He won double the Super Bowls that Matthew Stafford did. He won Super Bowl MVP in both of his Super Bowls. Stafford didn't even win Super Bowl MVP when they won the Super Bowl. Cooper Kupp did. But yet, they played at a very similar time, and throughout their entirety of their shared career, I basically every time they both played in a season thought Stafford was better. So that's where that context helps me a little bit. Stafford was better than Eli Manning. Um, he what the other thing is he's been very successful in 2 different eras and very good in 2 different eras. He was very good during that like 2015, 16, 17 era when it was Brady and Rodgers were the guys. The Russell Wilson was up there, Big Ben, Drew Brees, that kind of era. And then there's now this new era of the last couple of years with Mahomes and Lamar and Burrow and Allen. And who's the old guy after Brady's retired, after Rodgers kind of looks done, after Russ kind of looks done? Matt Ryan's retired. Who's the old guy that's still unanimously considered a top 10 quarterback? It's Matthew Stafford. He's still, even after the Super Bowl 2 years ago, he made the playoffs with a team that nobody entering the year thought would make the playoffs. This year, only team that came close to beating the Eagles in a playoff game was the Rams, a lot because of his play in that game. And he's had several different seasons for the Rams and the Lions that have been very impressive statistically. He's another guy, Mitch, that has carried teams. He
Yep.
carried the Lions for a decade, made that 2016 season where it was just fourth quarter comeback after fourth quarter comeback. 2017 was a lot like that too. And even in the playoff run, what really sealed it for me, why I changed my mind on Stafford, was that 2021 playoff run, especially that Tampa game where everything was falling apart around him, and he composed himself at the end and made those plays to Cup to set him up. He did the same thing in the next game against the Niners and then in the Super Bowl against the Bengals. That was what really changed my mind on Stafford, that he was able to do that in a high leverage situation. I don't know if he'll make the Hall of Fame. I think accolades wise, the fact that he only has 2 Pro Bowls will really hurt him. But what also helps is he's still near, if not in his kind of his prime right now. He's still, like I said, a top 10 quarterback in the league. And he's on a team that you today just ranked as the 4th best in the NFL. So he's on a contender. And so
Yeah.
he still has a chance to get to and win another Super Bowl, or maybe place in the top 5 of an MVP voting. So that still helps him. His story is still not completely written. And he's had a really successful career. Again, I don't know if he'll get in the Hall of Fame, but definitely a guy who has improved his stock tremendously over the last 4 years.
Oh no.
My
At
guy.
number 14, Matt Ryan. I'm going to say this, Ultra, and you can argue against me, debate against me, and tell me why Matt Ryan is above Matthew Stafford. A big game for my life, I'm taking Matthew Stafford. Alien, point the beam. Give me Matthew Stafford, bro.
The aliens come down. You have one game for your life, and you have a quarterback. You're taking Matt Stafford.
Matt Stafford over Matt Ryan, yes. Matt Ryan,
One of them,
good player. And again, this is where it's like Matt Ryan versus Cam Newton. I would lean Matt Ryan for their careers. Matt Ryan versus Josh Allen. I'm taking Josh Allen.
I think Josh Allen will pass him, but Matt Ryan has played so much longer.
Yeah, I know. So like you're looking at this from like a volume, but I'm like looking at this like I need to win this game right now. I think you're looking at more just like Josh Allen's better than Matt Ryan. Yeah,
right?
He's just better.
But that's not what I'm doing fully.
Yeah,
yet.
I know. I'm just throwing it out there for the commenters because the commenters are gonna say the same thing, bro.
You know what I want to hear though? I want to hear Mitch say some nice things about Matt Ryan, because Matt Ryan gets hated on a lot.
Does he actually?
He does.
Matt Ryan, I said Matt Ryan should have won first overall Miami Dolphins. Well, how old was I? 12-year-old Mitch said that the Dolphins should have picked Matt Ryan over Jake Long. I don't know why they did that, but Matt Ryan should have went first. Boston College. Once he threw the Hail Mary, bro, I was sold. I saw the Hail Mary, I was sold. Very good rookie season. Very good peak in 2016, although only to be outdone by the GOAT. And some very good seasons in between there. Some playoff disappointments like 2012, like 2010 against Aaron Rodgers. But he was sort of unfortunate at times where it was like he would play really well, but the other guy would play even better. Like Aaron Rodgers, like greatest of the greatest quarterbacks. Like it was like Aaron Rodgers had like the best game of his entire life and they lost. Or like Tom Brady just did. I don't even know how that happened.
The number one Tom Brady moment of his entire career, which is the greatest career.
Isn't that weird? Like Matt Ryan has been on the end of some of the most unfortunate events that I've ever witnessed.
The largest lead in an NFC Championship game blown was Matt Ryan. The largest lead in his blown was Matt Ryan. The largest
very good player, though. I feel like he was kind of always overshadowed was his problem. That's kind of what I gotta say. But Ultra, you go ahead and give us your argument here.
One of my favorite NFL writers for a long time, Scott Kasmar, used to label him as poor man Peyton Manning. Just kind of the way he used to play, the numbers he used to put up, which I think is kind of fair. Because in that division, it was usually Drew Brees who got more attention than Matt Ryan. And then
Yeah.
Cam Newton had his surge where he was the most popular, most discussed player in the NFL for like
Yeah.
a year. And then later in his career, when Tom Brady came to the Bucks, obviously he hogged all the attention there. Really, it was just a couple years, 2016, 2017, some of the years early in the 2010s when the Falcons were really good. But Matt Ryan, man, from about '08 really to about 2018, 2019, 2020,
Very
really
consistent.
very consistent, was a top 10 quarterback several years. Had a couple years where you could argue, like 2012, where he was, in that top five. Even 2018, which I think is a really underrated year, even though the team wasn't good. He had like, I think 4,900 yards, 35 touchdowns, 108 rating, 69% completion. Awesome stats. And obviously 2016, from like a statistical perspective, I still don't think enough people realize how special that year was from an efficiency perspective, especially. One of the best yard per attempt figures ever, one of the highest passer ratings ever. Even in the playoffs, like if you look at his playoff career, it started poorly, 08, 2010, 2011. But 2012, he had a really good statistical playoff run. 2016 is actually statistically one of the better playoff runs ever. And 2017 was a solid one too. So by the end of his career, he had like his final playoff stats are like 68% completion, a 101 rating. It's pretty solid stuff. He led the league in completion percentage in 2012, led the league in rating in 16, obviously won league MVP, first team All Pro, top 10 all time in passing, top 10 all time in passing touchdowns. So just a very successful career in terms of statistics, a pretty respectable career in terms of accolades. I don't think he'll get into the Hall of Fame right now. I don't think he made enough Pro Bowls. I don't think he had quite enough deep playoff success necessarily, or enough. If he had maybe had one more season quite on par with 2016, I think he definitely gets in. Not saying he won't, but I think there are some there, and I think the other thing that hurts him is kind of when we remember Matt Ryan, we kind of think of some of those blown leads, especially one very specific blown lead. But even in that game, I thought he played very well, especially throughout most of it. So Matt Ryan as a player, man, and it's not the same thing with Eli and Stafford. There were definitely several years. In fact, I would argue more than the opposite, where Matt Ryan and Matt Stafford in the same season, where Matt Ryan was better. So that's kind of why I was able to differentiate a little bit. But this kind of clump was very close. But Matt Ryan, my guy, I've been supporting him since day one, and always will be there to defend my guy, Matt Ryan, my favorite
All right.
football player ever.
At number 13, Kurt Warner. Now, Kurt Warner is stripped of a Super Bowl, is he not?
He
and
is
also
and
not an MVP.
He's stripped of an MVP, a Super Bowl, and a Super Bowl MVP, a first team All Pro, a Pro Bowl, everything.
My! And he's still this high. Can you make the argument why he's still this high? So Kurt Warner, and engine or facilitator is the better word of one of the greatest offenses of all time, changed the game. Mike Martz with the Rams, and threw the ball around the yard, and also dipped with the Giants. Pathetic. Came back with the Cardinals, and all of a sudden had one of the most miraculous runs in seasons we've ever seen. And actually a couple years with the Cardinals where I think he was pretty good. So he's one where almost his ability was, I think, mostly with his mind, his accuracy, and his timing. And when given the right pieces, I felt like he was popping off numbers. But I don't know if a lot of people would look at him and look at any of his traits and be like, wow, this guy was just incredible. I mean, there was a reason he was like an arena league quarterback.
He was bagging
groceries. He has one of the most incredible stories, right? But this guy is almost evidence that you can win with your mind. You can win with your decision making. You can win with your placement of the football. That's Kurt Warner. Ultra, go ahead and just explain why he's so high despite some of the things he's stripped of.
So he is stripped of, outside of Brett Favre, who we'll see shortly, he is the most affected by this solely being since 2000, because he's stripped of the best season of his career in 1999. But he had several other excellent seasons, and he made a Super Bowl with 2 separate franchises, which I think is super impressive for a quarterback.
Yeah.
There are only a couple other guys that actually did that, and you might have heard of them, and you'll see them at the
It's
very end
only
of this.
Brady and Manning, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So Kurt Warner still won an MVP in 2001. Still made a couple other Pro Bowls. I will say some of his decline had to do with injuries. He also wasn't. It wasn't quite as bad. He really only had like a couple or one really just horrific year,
Mm.
and it was the year after they lost to New England in '02 when he was hurt for like half the year. Mostly, he kind of backslid from elite to just kind of slightly above average if you actually
Okay.
look at some of the statistics. But then in Arizona, he has this rebirth where in '08 and '09, that was the other year you're thinking of, where he's really awesome. And what really pushed it for me, and this is another one of the criteria, Kurt Warner was a killer in the playoffs, especially in
Yeah.
Arizona. If you look at his numbers in his Arizona career in 6 games, 16 touchdowns, 4 picks, 71% completion, 9 yards an attempt, 117 rating, 289 yards per game. Even with the Rams, he was like over 300 yards per game.
I'm pretty
Um,
sure, Ultra, like if you were to put like the top 10 passing performances in like the Super Bowl, I'm pretty sure Kurt Warner's on there like 3 times.
yeah, I can
And
I
the
can look
only
at
other quarterback is Tom Brady. That's that many times on the list.
those passing yards in a
Yeah,
Super
like
Bowl.
Kurt, I know one of them was probably before 2000, but that still like speaks to his clutch level of play and also his ability to carry an offense too. Like especially in Arizona, a lot of people couldn't even name who their running back was then.
Yeah. So Mitch, number one's Brady against Philly in '52.
Of
Number
course,
two,
yeah.
number two is Brady against the Falcons. Number three is Warner against the Titans, although that doesn't count in this.
Yes.
Number four is Warner against the Steelers.
There you
Number
go.
six is Warner against the Patriots.
There you go.
So, yeah. But yeah, just a ridiculously good playoff performer, someone that definitely helped others around him. Like the best years of Larry Fitzgerald's career came with Kurt Warner. That I think that helps him, and was a really good by his Arizona career, a really good leader too. It's always tough to evaluate Kurt Warner because he didn't play for that long,
Hmm.
and he had kind of a weird, inconsistent. It wasn't always like didn't always go up this and went like this and then this and then this. But he's someone that's hard to rank in this would be hard to rank on the all-time list when comparing him with others. But accomplished a lot, had very successful seasons and very successful postseasons, and so that's why I have him all the way up at 13.